Hi, this is John Carrington with Top of the Morning, and we're going to see the fabulous 1812 fashion show at the Maryland Historical Society. So don't touch that dial, don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back. Hi, and welcome back, and here we are at the 1812 Fabulous Fashion Show. And as you can see behind me, the show is getting ready to get started. So don't go anywhere. Here it is.
Ostentatious. And we can see the emphasis is on fit rather than style. No ruffles here, no embroidery here. In a way, the tight-fitting, plain style clothing shows the democratization of wearing apparel. Some even dare to say suggested egalitarianism. Those tassels on those boots. This was actually military wear, directly inspired in civilian wear. The curled brim hat. The bar with the blues, sticking more with traditionalist blacks, but again, the fine topper hat. This is what perhaps some of the city council of Baltimore may have been wearing at the time. Black was a prominent color worn by older Americans. The President of the United States, James Madison, in 1812. Again, the trend towards simplicity is here. You see the focus on antiquity. This particular evening gown was copied directly from a fashion empire period ladies' fashion. Notice the high waistline. I know some of the gentlemen are. The puffy shoulder sleeves. the simplicity of design, and the lightness of fabrics to show the full Grecian form. Remember, to be educated, you study the Greek, and Alexander modeled this because the fashion is directly inspired from the Middle East, of course, like Alexandria, with the British armies in India, French troops garrisoning posts in the Middle East. These Eastern and Indian touches made their way. So here we see the lovely Grecian and Romanesque forms heavily influenced by the color and dash and panache of the Middle East and in India. You see the fine cotton dress and how it lays on her skin. Napoleon, realizing that cotton was short supply in France, introduced laws favoring the silk industry.
Well, you're enjoying the show, but don't go away. We'll be right back. Fabulous Fashions of 1812. I'm John Carrington, and this is Dan Morrison, and he's dressed as a drummer boy from 1812. Dan, how did you get in character for this performance?
Alright, so I'm a volunteer at Fort McHenry National Park and Historic Shrine. I've been volunteering there for 5 or 6 years now. I believe I started when I was in 4th grade. And basically every weekend during the summer we have living history there, where I and some of the other volunteers there, and park rangers as well, go out and do performances and demonstrations about what a drummer during the War of 1812 would have done, daily responsibilities, things like that.
All right, describe your costume.
So I'm wearing a fatigue cap right now. Normally when you are outside, you will be wearing a shakeout, which is a tall black leather hat, but for when you're not doing labor, you would wear the fatigue cap, because during the early 19th century, you always wore a hat outside, or else it'd be like not wearing shoes today. You just do it. I'm wearing a wool coat dyed red to signify that I am a musician. During the War of 1812, the regular the regular army would have worn blue, all blue here, and as you can see, the yellow trim here signifies that I'm an artillery musician. Musicians didn't wear blue though, they wore red, so that officers could find them quickly on the battlefield. Because the real purpose of a musician isn't to play music, it's to signal other people to do things. So if we're in battle and the officer needs a signal sent, look for the musician in red.
Ranger Tim, I want to ask you about this outfit. 1812, our president was James Madison.
Correct.
All right. Did James Madison wear something similar to this?
No, sir. He was old-fashioned. He wore knickers, stockings, and buckled shoes. So he was a little old-fashioned and still not into the trend of the era as I am dressed today.
So people wore what fit their economic level?
Not necessarily with tradition, what they felt, what they wore, what they liked, what they were used to. And there were trendsetters just like there are today. And so you have the younger men coming into the fashion wearing the long, lengthy pants, trousers of the day.
I love that hat. Talk about that.
It's a black felt hat. Notice the sides are curved up, and it's round. 1812 hats were all round. The trim is made of grosgrain trim, so another status of wealth.
Do you do any other reenactments or costume presentations?
Right. What we call living history impressions. Again, I'm a musician of the United States Corps of Artillery, and then I also do Civil War era. So we're also commemorating the 150th of the sesquicentennial for the Park Service. So I wear those as well.
Wow, this has really given us a great feeling for what it was like to be in 1812 and see all these wonderful fashions. Well, let's go right back to the fashion show.
The top that she's wearing with the sleeves. So on a cold evening, you may wish to wear the Spencer. Going out on a blustery day, wear the Spencer. The Spencer is that short jacket. They fit snugly to the body, kind of hugging it like a bodice, which again keeps that high waistline. They can be worn buttoned as she has it, or open. They were introduced by Lord George, the Earl Spencer of the 1790s. You didn't go outside without a hat. Straw hats like that, very good to keep the sun off on a hot summer. That fine white bonnet, the latest in the French style. We also see a nice paisley wool shawl, again keeping with the theme of keeping the drafts and the cold off. A nice fall palette on this particular dress with the yellow dress complemented by that shawl shows an fine example of a woman of the middle to upper classes reflecting the up-and-coming city young lady in the day dress. Again, it was considered improper for a lady to have her head covered outside, like I was talking about earlier. But again, if you are into shopping, you can buy a bonnet, but for a real flair, might I suggest that you consider a turban. You may say, well, why a turban? Why are these great ladies wearing turbans? These became very popular when Napoleon invaded Egypt in 1798. They discovered and brought back the Rosetta Stone. And this introduced a whole new way of, again, the way to bring the Middle East back here to, in a sense, the American West. Newspaper accounts extol the virtues of the Far East and capture people's imagination. You see the blue in young Stephanie Smith's dress, very popular in France at the time. Do not forget that what is now practiced.
Okay, this fashion show is rolling along really great, but don't you go anywhere. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back with more. Fabulous fashions of 1812. Now, all the women wore headgear. Talk about your headgear. Stephanie, this is Stephanie, by the way.
I am wearing a turban, which was made famous by Dolly Madison. Dolly Madison wore many different kinds of turbans, different colors. This was influenced partially by Napoleon conquering Egypt. The turban I'm wearing right now is actually tied myself. Some of the other woman that was with me actually wore it where it was on a form, tied, and then she sewed it on to make it easier. So this is actually tied, and then it's the same thing like the shawl I'm wearing. It's the same kind of material.
Well, it really matches up well with your dress. Talk about your material. What is that dress made of?
This dress is made of cotton. Women's dresses would be made out of cotton if you were middle class, upper class. Lower, poorer women would have been wearing linen. Linen is cheaper to get to make dresses. All the dresses would be made by the women themselves. My pattern, since it is a large pattern and the dark color, means that I'm probably an upper middle class woman. If the print was bigger than your thumb, it meant that it cost more to make. Smaller print is cheaper to make. Underneath, I am wearing a cotton chemise, which is almost like a cotton nightgown, and then a heavy cotton canvas stay, which is similar to a corset.
And I know you're starting to get that feeling for the War of 1812, how the people dressed and how they carried themselves, how they behaved. Well, we're going to get some more of that right now.
Gentlemen of the period, let's look at a middle-class gentleman, perhaps representing the editor of the leading newspaper in Baltimore at the time, the Niles Weekly Register. You'll notice he has trousers, no knee breeches here. Again, fortunes are made through fashions. Look at this hat. Let us see his golf hat one more time. That's a genuine beaver hat. Unless you think that fashions do not make money, John Jacob Astor made a veritable fortune trapping beaver on the West Coast. This is the Gibson family. Notice even amongst children, the high-waist fashion as well. Look at their dresses very closely. You'll see the addition of block printing being very popular at that time on those nice, the white day dress. Sarah Gibson, Sarah, take a bow. Sporting a blue floral on a nice cream base, clothed into winter. Allow me to introduce Molly Urtel for the early fall, late summer, and Cecilia Dowdley with our winter edition. Here we see Molly Urtel, a young lady of marriageable age, 17 years old, sporting a lovely day dress with a high waist. She represents the many of the sturdy young ladies of Baltimore at that time. A lady like her might help run a boarding house, work as a washerwoman. You can see she's carrying a water jug. Perhaps this is the true Molly picture as we her up. There's the colors. Now let's see the transition. So we're military uniforms. That's right. Baltimore is a seaport. So here we see African Americans and white sailors. This is the epitome of form-following function. Sailors have to work the lines of a ship. They have to work the docks of Baltimore. These scenes Mr. Coots there doffing his hat. He might also put some glaze on that hat or tar hat to weatherproof it. British and American sailors look very simple. Captain Isaac Hull of the famous ship Constitution, Old Ironsides, described his men as wearing blue jackets and scarlet vests. So you can see one of our sailors wearing that exact clothing. Also, let's not forget that about 20% of those sailors in our Navy were indeed African American, and they played a huge role during the War of 1812. For our wonderful port of Baltimore, let's give a big hand for some of that men. The U.S. Army was totally on board with fashion. You'll notice the hat, the chapeau de bras. It could be worn under the arm. The British wore it fore and aft. Napoleon wore it side to side. Americans, being neither pro-French nor pro-British, cocked it off to the side and simply called it a cocked hat. We can also see how, in a way, civilian dress influences the military, and vice versa. Look at that fine cloak, ladies and gentlemen. This is the thing to wear whether you're in the Army as an officer, or perhaps a gentleman for the streets of Baltimore with the oncoming winter. This particular cloak was modeled exactly off one worn by Captain John O'Connor of the 3rd Artillery, and is in the collection of the West Point Museum. Made out of wool, it is closed at the throat with a gilt metal eagle clasp, and the collar is lined with gold cotton velveteen. The statue hand. Well, if you notice on his left shoulder, you'll see a gold bullion epaulette. Gold being the color of artillery. The epaulette on the left shoulder designates lieutenant. Perhaps this is why the British call them left-tenants, because they wore their epaulette on the left side. Then you can also see, now this uniform, interestingly enough, was designed for guys from Fells Point who wanted to look like Westerners while living on the East Coast. You see that green was the color of the hunter. Notice the fine green, the twinge of red fringe. So when it rains on this man, the rain is whipped away with the lace army. This is the army that will defend your homes and firesides from British invasion. Private Tim Phoebus. Notice the gaiters. They look like boots, but indeed they are not. In a sense, those gaiters have buttons. 18 buttons down the side for the 18 states of the United States. This is a cheap boot, ladies and gentlemen, because under the gaiter is a strap that goes under your shoes so you don't lose your shoes when marching in the mud.
Okay, you're getting some fashion ideas, aren't you? Fashion that was old, but now you can bring it back. Well, you're going to get more ideas in a moment. We'll be right back with more of the 1812 Fashion Show. And this is Kwame, and he was in the Fabulous Fashions of 1812. Kwame, explain what your costume was, because this is not the costume, folks. It's a different costume. Talk about the costume you had on.
Well, my costume basically consisted of a couple of parts. There were these sailor pants, which had flat front trousers, which they unbutton in the front, just so like if you had to use the bathroom or anything, and they tie in the back. Then there was an undershirt, which was bluish plaid, a waistcoat, which is like a modern day vest, but it has 2 layers, one in the front, one in the back, and a nice sailor's coat to go over top. And
did you wear a hat?
I did not have a hat. I wasn't that high up in rank to wear a hat. Yeah, it was a really fun experience, and I would love to do it again. And I'd like to thank you for interviewing me for this process.
And thank you for being a part of it.
Oh.
And we're back with Howard Kuntz, Fabulous Fashions of 1812. What did you learn from experiencing the fashion show and wearing the hat? How did it affect you personally?
Well, you have a better grasp of history, for one. You have a better grasp for what the men of the 1800 era, the 1812 era went through. We tried to live it, we tried to experience it on our scale. And we tried to impart this to our visitors from all over the world. Every weekend we see people from almost every continent, and they always have the best questions, and we try to impart those questions with a good answer.
And we have Christian here, and Christian had the pleasure of being a part of the Fabulous Fashions of 1812. And Christian, what was your character? Talk about it.
I was one of the African American sailors. You know, part of that small portion that was actually there. It was a very nice experience. Another friend of mine was also an African American sailor, and we had a jacket, we had a vest underneath, a shirt under that. I had a tan, red, and blue on. He had a little bit of plaid mixed with some stripes.
Experience, would you do it again?
I would definitely do it again. It was something very. I'm used to being behind it all, you know, and watching what's happening. But the experience of having, you know, all eyes on you, everyone watching you, it was really nice. I loved it.
And we have Aiden, who's one of our designers for this fabulous fashion show of 1812. Aiden, how did you come up with all these designs?
Well, Nora, who is the costumes teacher at BSA, told us that the Historical Society was looking for designs that incorporated 1812 fashion into more modern, you know, designs. So I kind of, in my design, I took I wanted to go for like a little androgynous look. So like I put a lot of men's clothes on a woman. So which a lot of girls are doing now with like baggy coats and like oversized, you know, boots and stuff like that, into, you know, the different reasons for why they had those fashions, and, you know.
Well, thank you, Aiden. You did a wonderful job, and I applaud you. Thank you. I know you had a lot of fun mingling with Francis Scott Key and Dolly Madison. Well, that's the kind of party they're having. Let's see some more.
What is he wearing there? Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want you thinking that only ladies have high style. This is a bandit. What is a bandit? Look at that fine silk coat he wears. This is an example of informal clothing worn by men in the early 19th century. These nightgowns were worn over the shirt and the breeches in the privacy of their own home before noon or late at night. They appear in the male wardrobe in the mid-17th century and were inspired by kimonos given by the Japanese shoguns to the directors of the Dutch East India Company. During the 18th century, these nightgowns evolved into different shapes, from the simple T-shape of the original kimono to others cut like a European coat, using a variety of fabrics, including silk, cotton, and wearing a red dress that is absolutely on fire. And actually, ladies and gentlemen, you can say truthfully that the dress was saved from fire. Let me explain. The dress that we have reproduced here is reproduced from an original. When the British were marching on Washington, D.C., after the American Army fled, Dolly Madison not only had the portrait of George Washington saved, that's the one with the dollar bill, but she also directed her brother to save the red draperies in the restroom as well. These draperies were later made into a dress, and that's what you see here. So in a sense, a dress saved from fire. Dolly Madison actually built the image of the First Lady. It wasn't just the President's wife anymore. It was the First Lady. Her different parties, soirees, and balls helped bring the political parties together and helped bring about unity of our government during the War of 1812. Why does she hold a British flag? Well, during one of those grand balls held on December 8th, 1812, as they were highlighting the American naval victories over two British ships, a young American officer burst into the ballroom to announce that yet another British ship, the Macedonian, has surrendered. He carried the flag to Dolly Madison. She draped it over her arms, and the rest, in a sense, is history. So, ladies and gentlemen, the charismatic, the lovely, the beautiful Dolly Madison. And here we see Francis Scott Key, the eyewitness to that. Before we talk about Key's role, though, let us pay attention to fashion, because after all, that is why we are here. Look at his pants. These are the latest in 1814. Not pants, ladies and gentlemen. These are trousers. The bell crown again being fashionable in 1814. Notice how this is different from the copper. And gentlemen, this is what Francis Scott Key likely wore when he went out to rescue Dr. William Beans from the clutches of the British. And of all the accessories of fashion at this period of time, we can argue that perhaps one of the most important in this circumstance was this telescope. Because as we can see through the spyglass, that is what Francis Scott Key was able to see the Star-Spangled Banner waving by dawn's early light to write our national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, Francis Scott Key!
Space for his lovely rendition of the.
Wow, this is such a great party. 1812, the fabulous fashion show. I enjoyed the food. There was authentic chocolate dipped bacon. Politically incorrect now, but lovely, lovely food to have in the year 1812. The hot cider was really delicious. I had a glass of hot cider. It was just steaming out of the glass, and it had cinnamon in it. It was just delicious. And then, of course, there was the tea. That was original tea from the year 1812. And, of course, there were the hors d'oeuvres. There was little sandwiches, an egg sandwich that was on a little strip of bread with the seasoning all through the boiled and mashed together egg. It was just delicious. The breads that were served, the pastry, it was just fantastic. 1812 was a good year to gain weight. To meet friends and mingle. And that's what you're getting here on this particular edition of our Top of the Morning. So don't go anywhere. And this is Pat Perluke, and you're one of the organizers. Where did the idea come from?
Well, we have an education committee that's a part of the War of 1812 bicentennial celebration. And we've been working on projects throughout the year to have Marylanders more aware of the history of Maryland. And the fashion show was one of those events that we have actually conducted over the year. And the other thing that we wanted to be able to do was to involve students in our project. And so the Baltimore School of Arts and also the students from the National Academy Foundation who provided our food service today did an excellent job. And what we tried to do is encourage younger people to have a better understanding of the history of our country, but also Maryland's role in the War of 1812.
Well, thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
And we have Jonte Daniels.
The dresses were like so beautiful, and also the Asian influence, the French influence, I didn't know that. So that was one of the things that I really did like, is that the French did influence the American fashion.
How can our viewers get in contact with the Baltimore National Heritage Area?
There's lots of ways. You can go on to www.ns.gov/BALT. That's our website. And you can find anybody or find out about our programs or what's going on in the heritage area that way. Or you can email me, sdaniels@baltimoreheritagearea.org, or you can call 410-878-6411 and reach the Heritage Area office.
Do you have any closing thoughts?
I think that everyone should keep their ears to the ground, because there's a lot more coming out of the Education Committee. There's a lot more things happening with the Baltimore National Heritage Area, and I think that we, as Baltimoreans, need to embrace our heritage, because we did play a huge part in America's identity with the Star-Spangled Banner National Anthem. That's coming next.
All right, I want to thank Jonte Daniels and everybody that cooperated in making this fabulous fashion show of 1812 happen. I just want to thank you. And welcome back, and we're here, Top of the Morning, the fabulous fashion show of 1812. This is the flyer, but there were some very important sponsors and people who made this fashion show happen. The event sponsors were SK Meats, Richardson Farms, Christopher Schaefer Clothiers, Chef Expressions. The people who planned the event are the American Flag Foundation, Baltimore National Heritage Area, Baltimore City Public Schools, especially the Baltimore School for the Arts. Those young people really kicked in some great talent and ideas. The Fort McHenry National Monument and Historic Society, and the Fort McHenry Living History Reenactors and Volunteers, and of course the Maryland Historical Society. They all work together to make the fabulous fashion show of 1812 happen. Well, this has been Top of the Morning, and I want you to remember that whenever you want to find out what's going on in your morning, watch Top of the Morning. This is John Carrington saying until next time, Top of the Morning. Bye-bye.